Hey there, Dane Cash here. Before you go any further, I'm going to take a quick moment of your time to say that if you've ever considered becoming an Escape Collective member, now is a great time to do it. It's Tour de France season, and you won't want to miss our members-only shows over the next few weeks. You also won't want to hit a paywall when you're trying to read our racing analysis or our deep dives into tech. And on top of that, you can get your first month for just $1 right now. Head on over to escapecollective.com/TDF and sign up. Hello and welcome back to the How the Race Was Won podcast. I'm Dane Cash, and the Tour de France is over. We can tell you how the Tour de France was.
The men's Tour de France.
You're right.
We have multiple Tours de France.
You're right about that. And because of the Olympics, we get a little bit of a break in between men's and women's. So the men's.
What do you mean a break? Aren't the Olympic road cycling events just as big as the Tour de France in your mind? No? They're not?
No. Well, actually, we should say, since we're talking about the women's race, I do think the Olympic women's race is a bigger deal relative to the men's race.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I might.
Yeah.
I am. Maybe we'll talk about it on a future show. Not a huge fan of how the Olympics.
Who even are you? I wasn't able to introduce you, and the listeners are probably wondering, who is this person? Cosmo Catalano, bike racing analyst extraordinaire. How are you? I
am well. You can add. De Coubertinian skeptic, not a huge believer in the so-called modern Olympic movement.
De Coubertinian?
Pierre de Coubertin,
yeah.
I believe. He's the guy.
Learn something every day.
No. I made that word up. It probably doesn't exist.
We should talk about Tour de France, though, right? I mean, that's...
Yes.
Yeah.
The men's Tour de France.
Yeah. Which is now over and was won by... Well, the guy that was kind of dominating basically the entire time, the pre-race favorite, your pick to win.
My pick to win.
We're going to talk about the final week of Tour stages where said guy was quite active, winning a bunch of times. We're going to talk about some of the breakaway riders. We'll try to draw some conclusions from the whole race. Who were the winners and losers? I think the winners are kind of obvious. The losers is the real interesting one. We'll get to that. Yeah, all that and more coming up in the show. So, let's get down to it. Cosmo, stages 16 through 21. What was the headline?
Sorry, it's boring again. Maybe that's the...
Ouch.
Yeah, well, I mean, is that an ouch, or is that a statement of fact?
Both, right? I mean, and also I would posit that there were moments that were exciting. Especially thanks to the efforts of folk like Richard Carapaz making the battle for polka dots interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was a secondary excitement.
Yeah.
It was not the excitement that we had felt previously in this particular Tour de France.
When it seemed like it might be a little bit closer. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, tell us how those stages were won.
Jasper Philipsen winning a sprint. We finally got a breakaway day on stage, was it 16, 17? 17. We had a minor shake-up with Pogačar out sprinting Vinigo, getting another 2 seconds, I think.
Evenepoel that day.
Yes, true. Good point.
Got a little bit of time, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah.
He did. It's actually hard to scan the results and figure this out.
It's at 10 seconds is how much time he got on.
Hey,
Pogačar.
that's a lot.
Yeah.
Considering it's on Pogačar.
Yeah.
And it kind of shows that Pogačar was still a little bit worried about Vinigo.
Yeah.
He wasn't completely super duper confident. Stage 18, we got another breakaway. Victor Campenaerts beautifully done stage. Got into the break with very little effort. Kind of faked being hurt a little bit in the break and used Michał Kwiatkowski's confidence in his sprint against him. And then was like, psych, I'm not actually tired. Great sprint, blew everyone else away. Immediately FaceTimed his wife and infant child. That was cute. But this is the sort of breakaway win that we kind of have been lacking all tour all Tour de France. No disrespect to Carapaz, but we just hadn't seen this yet.
The Campeonato win was really cool after having seen the ASO, I think it was ASO's Instagram that morning. They went around interviewing, stuck a mic in the face of some likely breakaway candidates and asked them, who is the perfect breakaway companion? And Victor Campeonato said Mikhail Kwiatkowski. And he was the first person that they asked. And so, 4 hours later, 5 hours later, he proved to be quite prescient. Yes. Stage 19.
Stage 19 was the day when things were not so good. We had what looked like a classic Visma/Jumbo-Visma kind of setup day. We had two strong riders in the break in Wilco Kelderman and Matteo Jorgensen. It seemed like, Vingegaard was going to be set up to do a big attack over kind of an intermediate climb. There are three big climbs on the day, uphill finish. And he didn't have the legs. That's straight up what they said in post-race interviews, just wasn't there for it. So that kind of freed up the break to do what they wanted to do. Jorgensen did a good attack at the bottom of the last climb, got space, rode really steadily, and still there was no stopping Tadej Pogačar. I mean, he attacked out of that GC group, and I think Evenepoel tried to respond. Vingegaard sat behind Evenepoel and tried to survive. I think 2K to go, Pogačar caught Jorgensen and actually had to put on a big effort to get by him. He really wanted to make sure there was no space and was actually probably the only time in the entire race Pogačar was looking over his shoulder, worried that Jorgensen might come back because he thought he went a little too far into the red. But ended up winning the stage by 21 seconds, gaining almost 2 minutes over Evenepoel and Vingegaard. Really kind of an emphatic stamp of authority, to borrow an overused cliche, on the race.
And the way you introduced this stage, sort of saying it was the not as good. We should clarify maybe that the reason that it is that way is that Pogačar winning so handily then kind of makes the last two stages just less interesting. Yeah.
I mean, but also this was when I introduced this particular stage, I said it was set up as like the classic multi-stage Visma strategic operation.
Yeah,
similar to stage 12 at the 2022 Tour de France, where they put some strong riders in the break. They had Roglic go early. It was really just a whole ball of yarn to trap Pogačar, and it looked like something similar was happening here, and it just didn't come together.
Yeah, and not only did it not come together, it was like Vingegaard lost a ton of time.
He was straight up bad.
Yeah. Stage 20.
We had another day where we thought we might get a break because Pogačar said literally they were going to let the break go. Soudal Quickstep kind of did a lot of work keeping the break close. And then UAE decided they weren't going to let the break go after all because it was close. Pogačar won again, 7 seconds over Vingegaard. I think about a minute over Evenepoel. It's kind of really, I would say, the end of Evenepoel's chase for second place in this event.
Yeah, it seemed like Vingegaard really bounced back here.
Well, he was less bad.
Well,
I mean,
yeah. I mean, that's all I'm saying.
Our metric for Vingegaard, right, is being able to beat Pogačar.
Sure.
He was not.
Sure.
At no point during the stage did he look like a reasonable threat to beat the yellow jersey. I think there was at one point some talk of maybe he would gift the stage because the two riders, as dominant as Pogačar was, they both looked a little bit tired and disengaged towards the end of this race. They both knew, I think Pogačar, there was limited interest in gaining more time because he knew he had enough. I think Vingegaard knew he couldn't gain meaningful time here. So they really were both kind of riding to the finish, and then there was a sprint at the end. And, 7 seconds over 300 meters at the top of a climb is still pretty big. And that's about what Pogačar was able to get.
All right, so with a huge lead in hand, he had more than 5 minutes on Vingegaard after the stage. All we had left was a final TT in Nice.
Yep. So that would be 6 minutes over Vingegaard in the final telling.
And he was Pogačar was, by the way, the pre-race favorite for the TT.
For the stage, really?
Yeah. Huh. It was close-ish with Evenepoel. But I think there was such a sense that Pogačar was, well, first of all, in such good form, and second of all, not just going to let this opportunity go. How did that final stage play out?
Well, it's a time trial, so everybody goes by themselves, and then they count the time between the start and finish at the end. No, it's we had perhaps Groupama's best finish of the Tour de France, and Lenny Martinez being in the hot seat for most of the day. It just wasn't there was a small handful of people who are going to do well here. I think Victor Campenaerts summed it up nicely before the stage by saying that all the GC contenders already live in Monaco, so they know the roads really well. And in fact, this came up in Pogacar's post-race interview that he was Urska, his partner, girlfriend, I don't know particularly the best way to phrase it, but his like woman that he lives with, Urska, is also a pro cyclist. She was sick of riding these stages, of the climbs on the stage, because they practice them so often. And so Tadej said he needed to do well here. He did very well. Both he and Vinigo took huge risks relative to their GC positions, I think. But also these guys race, they've trained this. You don't want to mess. If you've planned to race this flat out, you've got all your lines dialed, you know what you're going to do. You don't want to start changing things on game day, right? Like they're going to go out and race what their legs will let them do and just hit their lines coming back down. They did. Pogacar a minute up in this one. I think 15 seconds-ish, 11 seconds, it looks like, between Vinigo and Evenepoel. It's a little weird to finish the race with a hard time trial, because I think you end up with a lot of people who are really just trying to make it through the end of the Tour. I think I remember Sylvain Dillier in the race coverage was actually like aggressively on his road bike, aggressively drafting people who are passing them on their TT bikes. It was just really like, he knows that was the level of leeway I think riders knew they were working with. It's like, he could draft that hard. Yeah, maybe they'll time penalize him, but they're not going to kick him out of the race. And it was really just kind of people trying to finish today.
There were several people who were more than 9 minutes down. Groenewegen was 10:41 down. Those are, yeah, you're right. Rough way to finish.
Big margins.
Yeah.
And I will say, before the stage, Pogacar also said, at the end of stage 20, it's like, maybe I will, enjoy the crowd a little bit more tomorrow, which after saying he would let the break go, everyone was pretty clear, like, okay, he's going to destroy everybody.
Yeah.
He did. He did celebrate before the line. He probably gave himself a 2 or 3 second disadvantage by putting his arms up as he rode into the finish.
I feel like I've come away from this Tour with skepticism moving forward of both what Visma and what Tadej Pogacar say. That's what I've learned from one of the many things I've learned from this Tour. So all told, Tadej Pogacar comes away from the 2024 Tour de France victorious with a 6-minute, 17-second gap to Vingegaard, a further 3 minutes and 1 second more to Evenepoel, and then beyond that, Joao Almeida, his own teammate, 19:03 down in fourth. Pretty dominant Tour de France from Tadej Pogacar, who was, again, the pre-race favorite, but I personally did not expect this. I didn't think this would be this dominant. I thought that, well, let's get into it. I mean, let's get into the GC battle here, because I think that's the big question, the big conversation, the big talking point. Personally, I thought that Vingegaard was going to come into this race in pretty good form. And I thought that Visma was kind of playing a little bit coy. I would even go so far as to say I think they were kind of full of shit when they were talking about how Vingegaard was, we'll just, whatever happens, we'll be happy. And the reason I say that they're full of shit is that they clearly weren't happy. I mean, they were very displeased. They were upset. I think Vingegaard was really unhappy, sad even, you might say, in that final week with how things played out. It was not the reaction of someone who came in not expecting to do well. That was the reaction of someone who came in thinking he was going to do well. I think in the end, Vingegaard was actually pretty close to being pretty healthy, which is amazing. And he should get credit for this. I mean, I think it's pretty amazing what he was able to do, come back and be competitive in this race, win a stage. He won a stage. That's another big thing. And yet, even though they did come in, I think, in pretty good form, Pogacar was just on another level from anything I think we've ever seen. And that's despite having raced the Giro. And it was just a really, I don't know. We'll never know this. We will never know how things would have gone. But I personally do wonder whether Pogacar would have just won anyway, even if Vingegaard had never crashed at the Basque Country. Again, we'll never know.
I mean, it's super unknowable, right? I mean, even there, you can look at your numbers all you want and be like, okay, well, I put out this much power threshold, after this long of a ride, but you don't know. You can have similar numbers in a controlled training situation that will still be negatively impacted in an actual race, right? There's no way to know for sure, even with all the metrics available to the modern professional cyclist, how impactful that crash was at the Basque Country. And I am leaning towards it being more impactful than people considered it to be. I think Kaylee Fretz of Escape Collective has been kind of banging the drum of having a crash at Tour of the Basque Country is not going to make you better as the race goes on. It will probably make you worse as the race goes on. And I think the Giro thing, like, I don't think it's bad training necessarily for the Tour de France. I think historically people haven't done it. But I think when you're Tadej Pogačar and you have total control over your schedule and you can build a schedule around doing well at the Giro and doing well at the Tour, that it's not the worst idea in the world. He had a solid month of not really doing anything. He also really did seem to be training more in the Giro. There were a lot of stages where he seemed to go very, very hard for a specific period of time and then go less hard. He also mentioned in one of the post-race interviews, he did have a bad day in the Giro, at least one, but he won't tell. He didn't say which one it was. And it's very hard to tell given how handily he won that race.
Yes.
But he also did the Giro thing is maybe a little overplayed. I think it's possible to go really hard 1 month and then rest for a month and then go hard again. That doesn't weird me out that much.
What you're saying is a reasonable explanation for sure. I mean, it all makes sense to me. That said, I mean, it hasn't been done like in 30 years almost. So that is a reason why I and others, I think, question it.
Yeah, it hasn't been done in 30 years, but like no one's been trying to do it for 30 years, right? No one has been foaming at the mouth being like, I want to win the Giro and the Tour in the same year. That's what I want to do.
Nobody who was a Tour favorite, let's say, except for Chris Froome, who didn't do it when he was not maybe at the height of his powers. It was already on the tail end, but he's pretty darn good at the Giro that year when Froome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
In any case, yeah, Vingegaard did not get stronger. He just didn't really have it. I also want to point out another sort of unknowable, but I think one that bears talking about, and maybe we can know a little bit more, or we can conjecture more, let's say that. I don't think Visma's weakened team is the reason why Vingegaard lost either. I think Visma had some tough, I don't want to say tough luck, misfortune, let's say. Who knows if it was luck? If you crash, it could be your own fault. But in any case, there was a rough build up to the Tour for Visma. They didn't have Sepp Kuss, and Matteo Jorgensen did a great job as the best lieutenant around. But this is a weaker Visma team than we've seen by far. And I want to point out that I don't think it would have mattered even if they did have Sepp Kuss.
I want to point out that we were talking about this after the stage that Vingegaard won. Like it was like this was like Visma was going to totally pull this out. Like none of these things mattered because Visma was still really good, right? Like our impressions of what is going on is always tainted by this recency bias.
Yes,
and I think it felt very familiar to a lot of people. The stage where Pogačar went for an early attack, like trying to sneak away seconds from Vingegaard, who was kind of thundering along behind him like a Terminator, and then reeled him back in, and then won a 2-up sprint against Pogačar, which has never happened before. So that I am maybe less hesitant to be like, oh, Visma never had a chance. Like I think I don't know that you can necessarily say that. I think there is an alternate universe where Visma goes on and wins this Tour like they've won every other Tour these past 2 years. And we didn't see that. But I don't think that there was any glaring, other than Vingegaard just not having the legs to go hard and Pogačar being really fit.
That's exactly what I mean.
There was no thing where it was like, here's where Visma completely failed.
That's exactly what I mean, though. I mean that with the Vingegaard that we had at this Tour, no amount of other teammates at Visma being good or bad was going to make this different. That's what I mean. I'm not. If Vingegaard had been healthy, that's a whole different. Or if Vingegaard had been good enough, not even healthy. I mean, if he'd been good enough to beat Tadej Pogačar, because I already said I thought even if he were healthy, he might not have beaten him.
We might reference another Kaylee Fretz think piece here, where he says that you can have all the tactics in the world.
Yeah, you need the legs. And Vingegaard didn't have the legs. And this is something I talked about a show or two ago, where I think so much is made of having a good team, but at the end of the day, you need to be better than everybody else in some way. Either you need to out-time trial them or out-climb them, or else you're never going to get a gap. And I think we saw at this Tour de France that Pogacar was both a better time trialist and climber than Vingegaard every day of the race. I mean, the one day that Vingegaard, took time, it was because of bonus seconds. And at the end of the day, when all bonus seconds were accounted for, it was 1 second that he got on that stage that he won. Again, I think it's a really extremely impressive what he was able to do in this Tour. And I actually really, really liked seeing him win that sprint. It was fun. It was different. It injected this whole new sense of, what's going to happen? We talked about this last show where suddenly the bookies thought that Vingegaard was going to win a race. I'm glad we got that. But at the end of the day, Pogacar in his 6 stages, not even close. It was a dominant performance.
The last 3 stages running is a pretty impressive statement. Of course, summit finishes and time trials. Granted, it was a hilly time trial, but still, that's not a thing that happens very often.
Yeah, that is... I don't remember it ever happening when I've been watching, seeing that level of dominance. All right, I also want to talk about some of the non-Pogacar Vingegaard stuff here. Let's throw to a break first. Okay, we're talking about the mountain stages, and I want to talk 2 things. I want to talk about the GC battle further down and some of the things that we learned. But first, maybe let's talk about something that's I think is more fun, which is the breakaways, because I think there's so many
at this Tour.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different talking points there too, because somebody, was it maybe Kaylee in our group chat, said something like, you didn't feel like very long ago we were pointing out that breakaways are always winning these days. And that wasn't true at the Tour. It wasn't true at the Giro either. Tadej Pogacar was a big reason for this. His team just chased everything down to set him up to win. Well, yeah, he's won 12 Grand Tour stages so far this year. He's won almost a quarter of all Grand Tour stages this year, has Tadej Pogacar. And that has not been great for the breakaways, because we've seen in years past that the mountain stages, very often you get this double battle, right? Where GC guys, they're just worried about each other. Breakaway guys go up the road. And that didn't happen nearly as much this year. However, in the last week, we did get it on... Well, we got 2 breakaway stage wins in this last week. One of them was not really mountain stage, so I think it was more likely to go to the break. That's the one that Campenaerts won. But Richard Carapaz on stage 17 finally got that big mountain breakaway stage win. And, we should point out that Tadej Pogacar still showed interest on this day. But he at least let the rest of the world get the stage win, or vie for the stage win. And I just kind of wanted to spare a moment to send a heartfelt thank you to Richard Carapaz, because I thought he really livened up this last week. He had a brilliant last week, honestly. He got everything out of this Tour, I think, that EF could have expected. And I wrote a story about this over at escapecollective.com about how, first of all, he was in the break for 4 straight days. And that is next level hard. It also just requires a lot of luck. It's so hard to get into a single break, and the fact that he was able to do it 4 days in a row.
You make your own luck a little bit too.
You make your own luck, and your team helps. And his team was
so much
awesome. Yeah, EF, they understood the assignment, and that's the thing. They coming into this race, if you are a team that is not UAE, Soudal Quickstep, or Visma, you might as well just not have focused on the GC, and that's. So hats off to EF for basically targeting this thing. They realized that Carapaz was going to have a chance to get the polka dots, and they just went all in on it. And they had a good team for it, too. They got rouleurs and climbers. They were able to put him into the breakaway. He finished first on stage 17, and then 4th and 3rd on 19 and 20. It was a really, really great final week for him.
Yeah. No, and we've become so hypnotized to this idea that teamwork in Grand Tours is like having a bunch of people ride up a climb as fast as they can, and then one guy goes fast at the end. And with EF, you could see them having a very clear strategy in a lot of these later breakaway stages, because they had Ben Healy, who was up the road the entire race, right? So it's not like you can't be like, oh, EF is planning something because Ben Healy's in the break, because he's always in the break. And they had him working in the break to the point where it was like, well, there goes Ben Healy again. This is probably stupid, but also he's really good at riding in a breakaway. He does this all the time. Maybe we should go with Ben Healy. Him and Sean Quinn kind of setting up these attacks where they would work over the entire group, and then Carapaz would kind of be able to pick his moment, be able to follow guys, be able to see who is chasing his teammates, who's looking weak, who's looking good. It was a very concerted team effort. It doesn't, it doesn't lend itself as easily to a, obvious sort of breakdown on the coverage, but very clearly happening, very clearly intentional. And I think we'll talk about this maybe in a later item. Like, this is something that it is, I think, way better for a team to do than, say, chasing 12th place on GC.
Yeah. Basically, I think anything other than the podium or stage wins. And that's, first of all, EF did get a stage win out of it. Also, they spent a day in yellow. Yeah, and Carapaz, by the way, came from a pretty rough place. He crashed badly at the Tour de Suisse, had to abandon, or maybe DNS the following day, and then got really sick. And he came into the Tour, and Waters, team boss Jonathan Waters, said it was, I think he used the word gamble, quote, gamble, to bring him to this race. And I think the gamble paid off. The fact that he was able to take the polka dots. And
Waters loves a compelling narrative, right?
Waters loves a compelling narrative, but
he will find one where none exists.
So, an Unchained, what was it, last year? He said, last year's race, he said that Carapaz was the one rider who could take on Pogacar and Vingegaard, which...
Yeah.
I mean, obviously not true. But that said, in this case, I think it's a pretty accurate to say that it was a gamble to bring him, and it paid off. And I'm just glad that he did. I'm glad that Carapaz made these stages interesting. And, for me, you might want to... Like, the way that the ASO frames the mountains classification and the results, like, obviously it's not the best climber classification.
Yeah, I really hate the Melior descriptor they use for these categories.
Obviously, Tadej Pogacar is the best climber in the race, and we know that. Yep. But the yellow jersey already tells us that. So I don't need them to change the KOM point system at all. Maybe change the name that you're describing it as best climber. But the way that the point system works, it incentivizes something that is good, which is attacking on all of the climbs that are not the last climb of the day. And yes, it makes it entertaining. So
I agree. But there are a lot of people on the internet who like to do forum posts about, why isn't the KOM jersey going to the best climber?
Yeah, which is like, we don't need that. We already have the yellow jersey for that.
Look, Dane, these people have been watching cycling for all of 3 weeks, okay? I think they know what they're talking about.
The alternative, though, I think some of them have also been watching for like 50 years, and there was a time when the best climber would win the polka dots, but not the yellow, because the time trials that were like 5,000 kilometers of time trials meant that the best climber wouldn't win the yellow jersey. But now that the best climber in the race wins the Tour pretty much every year, yeah, I'm happy to have a KOM jersey that does something a little bit different. All right, winners and losers. So first of all, I think it's pretty clear who the winners are at this Tour de France. Certainly UAE is the winner of the Tour de France. I think the sprinters teams pretty evenly carved up the sprints. You had Alpecin and Intermarché doing most of it, not all of it. I think it's a win for Soudal Quickstep, getting on the podium of the Tour. That was their objective coming in. And Visma, compared to years past, obviously this was a downer, but compared to where the team was 2 months ago, they got second at the Tour. They won a stage. Pretty much everybody else is like knocking on the door of Loserville. And I was curious, Cosmo, I asked you before the show who your biggest losers were. And I think we both have two different answers. And they're not the same answer either.
No, they're different answers.
So,
for sure.
Who's the biggest loser for you of the team-wise?
I was looking more at Decathlon and at Groupama FDJ. I think, these are big French teams that, they have World Tour licenses, but it's basically to get them an invite guaranteed to the Tour de France. And this is, Decathlon doesn't sponsor that team for them to not do anything at the Tour de France. Groupama, similarly, like I said, like the only time I really noticed them in the event was Lenny Martinez having a good time trial on the last day. I saw David Gaudu not doing anything that made sense in a couple breakaways, but I remember what Oyer Lascano did a lot more than I remember what Gaudu did. I think it's a disheartening thing to see the home teams, so to speak, just kind of show up and go through the motions. And plenty of French riders had good races.
Yes.
Plenty of French teams had good races. But to my mind, like, these are the biggest French squads, and they didn't deliver in the one arena they should have delivered in.
David Gaudu finished behind Jasper Stuyven in the general classification, which is a real rough one. because
He was getting in the break. He wasn't going for GC, right?
Well, I mean, either way, if you're fourth at the tour one year, and then after that, you're not able to even.
I feel like there's a graveyard of fourth place Tour de France finishers. It would be interesting to look at the statistics.
Be that as it may.
Who had finished in fourth of the tour, and then what they did after.
A certain Mikel Landa, who is historically fourth in every race, by my reckoning, had a heck of a tour. He finished fifth at the tour while also being an awesome teammate for Remco. Yeah. So anyway, contrasting that, David Gaudu and Groupama did very little. And with the Catalan, we've been talking about this kind of all year on and off, how they've had a great year.
Except
for the tour. They just kind of disappeared.
Which is like 98% of sponsor exposure.
Which is rough for them. I think the context of them being French teams and not doing much is a big reason. Mine is also in the context of like expectations versus reality. Red Bull, Bora, Hansgrohe, man, all the money they poured into this team. Yes, Primož Roglič crashed, and I felt horrible that happened. But even before he crashed, it was pretty clear he was not going to be challenging for the win, maybe even the podium. I'm not sure he would have finished on the podium, even if he had a fully clean run at this. And they did pretty much nothing in this tour with all of the hype around new sponsor, investing in Roglič himself and some other riders. And because they took their maybe second best guy, Danny Martinez, to the Giro and not to the Tour, they really didn't have a backup plan. So once Roglič was out of this Tour de France, they just did very little. And
it wasn't just Roglič, right? Like they lost Vlasov too, who is an extremely versatile rider. He was clearly there on paper to help Roglič, but like he's a guy who can win on his own,
and who could have been in the top 10.
Yeah. Like he is definitely like pocket GC guy, can win stages. He's really good. He's really versatile, and losing him was a big hit. And they did have Jai Hindley very active in the kind of the second half of the race. He top 20 overall.
That's the thing, though. I would argue that Hindley is just another one of those disappointments where, again, this is a rider who...
I don't think he came in planning to chase stages, right? Like, this was sort of we lost Roglič, we've lost Vlasov. Right. Who else is here who can...
Well, they had good riders, though. You would think they would have been able to adjust. And I think that they were not.
I think that's a tough adjustment.
It is tough. But it's tough, but they're professional athletes who make...
Yes.
Well, and the team has a big budget now.
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe I'm being hard on them, but I feel like I think it's hard to dispute that they were one of the most underperforming of teams. The other one, to my eyes, being the Ineos Grenadiers. I'm not expecting Ineos to come in and win this tour. I'm not even expecting them to finish on the podium. But two things. First of all, Tom Pidcock and his dreams of GC contention are... I don't even know what we expect from him moving forward. We've talked about this at length. And then Carlos Rodriguez did finish 7th. But for a rider who's 23 years old, you would expect to be on the rise. And coming off of a pretty strong first several months of the year, he won Ramadi. He was second in the Basque Country, won a stage at the Dauphiné. He was never even close. Yes, he was 7th, but he was 25 minutes down on GC, which is shocking. And I think this is a team going the wrong way, put it that way. I think... if you're Ineos, you're even coming into this tour, you're not expecting a podium, but you're hoping for signs of improvement. And I don't think they got that. I think they got signs of, backsliding. Egan Bernal didn't really do what I think they would have wanted him to do after he also had a strong several months coming into the tour. Yeah, just not what Ineos wanted, and nowhere really near the level that they used to be at, obviously, but even at the level that they were at last year. I think Carlos Rodriguez did not finish as highly and nearly as close as he did last year. Yeah, disappointing tour.
It's a team that's kind of... I think you saw this in Unchained with their planning last year. Like, they're kind of directionless, right? They're really built around... Historically, the organization has had a success built around one rider going for GC and being good enough to dominate at that. And they they had a ton of really good riders coming into this race, but like you said, I don't know if Pidcock is going to keep doing the GC thing. He didn't finish this race. Kwiatkowski and Depluce are pretty versatile guys. They're really strong. Like Kwiatkowski was at least close to.
Yeah, he actually came close.
Yeah. Bernal and Geraint Thomas, I think, would be great if they had that GC contender in Rodriguez, and he didn't have a bad tour, really. Like, he just didn't have a potential winner tour.
He also faded pretty hard towards the end.
Yes, but what was his highest position on GC? Like 5th? Like he went from 5th to 7th or something?
That is accurate. That's accurate. It's more that he went from 6 minutes back to 20 whatever. But yeah.
Well, if you lose 2 minutes, 5 times,
right?
Like,
yeah,
there you go. I think that the idea. I think it's a team that needs to not be chasing GC like this, right? Like,
look at what a rider who can do it. Because
there's 2 riders who can do it now. Arguably 3.
Sure, maybe right. No, that's a good point.
This squad could 100% do what EF did. Probably
good point.
Better on paper. They have stronger guys with better results. I don't know if they can adapt themselves to ride like this. I think the number one thing I've seen missing from Pidcock is he doesn't seem to do the teamwork thing in a Grand Tour. Just even when he's in the same group as some of his guys, he doesn't seem like he's on the same radio with them, like, and it's not necessarily a knock. I think he's really good at sports and even races where the effort is primarily individual after a certain point. But, I don't know how he fits into this historical pattern that Ineos has. And I don't know if he could do that Ben Healy role where he's just constantly agitating and kind of setting things up for a more focused rider to take on King of the Mountains.
I think EF is a really good contrast because you're right. I mean, if you look, both Kwiatkowski and Pidcock, I think if they came into a tour and said, we want that King of the Mountains jersey, like, they have the skill set, the punchy skill set, the descending skills, which, ironically are required to be really good at being a King of the Mountains. Like, they could be up there. And you're right, they got the support riders. Lawrence Depluce is a great support rider, just sort of in looking for a captain. Yeah, I think it's a good contrast and maybe a further point bolstering the fact that they had such a disappointing tour. Again, based on their budget, them and Red Bull, all the money they have.
Once Pidcock moves to Red Bull and they get a clear idea of what they're trying to do. Because I think actually one of the cool things about the Red Bull team is probably going to be they are not going to be kind of cookie cutter. We'll get the fastest guy and have him go up the hill and then we'll win the Tour de France. I suspect that the Red Bull team will try to actually maximize sponsor value by doing cool stuff and winning cool races in cool ways, rather than showing up for 3 weeks and disappearing for the rest of the year.
One rider that is sponsor friendly, just ask Pizza Hut, that has been heavily tied to Bora, is one of those riders who, insofar as anybody who's not Pogacar or Vingegaard could win the Tour de France, Remco Evenepoel has been linked to Bora. He's
been linked to everybody, though, right?
Well, yeah, but most recently to Bora and pretty heavily to Bora. Let's put it that way. I haven't seen any links to EF or Decathlon, put it that way. And also, I just wanted to point out that Remco really impressed me this tour. He was not going to win. That became clear about halfway through, but he did finish on the podium. He did show us that he's not just the Vuelta winner. Which
1,000%. I had a Remco hater hat at one point, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah,
and I no longer have that hat. I am. I don't know if I'm Team Remco. I'm certainly not like a Remco Ultra or whatever. But yeah, he rode really well. He rode a really good Grand Tour de France against the best other riders. Really didn't have a terrible day.
Yeah.
I think minimized his losses really well. I think Landa being there was a huge help.
Yes.
Just someone who's been there before, who knows what to look for, who knows when to move up, who knows everything, basically. And he showed initiative. He really was like, on days when Vingegaard wasn't going to be that guy to keep Tadej at least on the same planet, he was able to step up to do that. He gained some time back, like just pretty much across the board, a really strong performance from a guy who has, in my opinion, historically shown that he's incapable of completing a Grand Tour without doing something dumb. Hats off. Good work, Remco. Thank you.
I feel like I could see a hypothetical Grand Tour even against Pogacar where he could win. It's got like 300K of flat TTs. But like, I don't think that that's true with anyone on the planet other than Vingegaard and him. That even there's a theoretical Grand Tour that might exist someday. Because, the Grand Tours back in the day did have a lot of TTs. And if for some reason ASO decided to resurrect the tours of like,
they used to have 2 TTs and it used to be 60K long.
And flat.
They used to be pretty flat.
Yeah. But he did show us that I just think he's got to be happy with his tour in general. He did come away with a stage win, and he is still relatively young, 24. He was the young rider, the best young rider in this tour. He didn't win a stage in the final week because there were not a whole lot of stages for him to win. There was one opportunity that he crashed right before the finish, and it injected a little bit of intrigue into the green jersey battle. Biniam Girmay, however, managed to push through the pain, won the green jersey, historic win, and I just was really happy to see it. And I thought we got a great 3 weeks of points jersey battling where he's going for the intermediates. And the big takeaway for me from this tour for Girmay, this might sound like so oversimplified, but he's really fast. And he's faster than I think we'd ever seen him be. In the past, we'd seen him do really well after a hard day or, winning a classic like Gent-Wevelgem. But at this tour, there were straight up drag races that he won. One time maybe in a finale against the best, and then in several intermediates as well.
Yeah, I am not quite on the Biniam Girmay pure sprinter train, but I think he absolutely could do what Sagan did.
Yes.
And be someone who is, he will pick off those stages that are just a little bit too hard for sprinters or things where there's a field split, crosswinds, all that stuff. I agree. I was impressed with how fast he was against people who are faster than him on paper. But I don't know that he's going to be, 6 stages a year, every single sprint, Champs-Élysées kind of guy.
No, I agree with that. I think it more could be that he does still win several stages by winning some of those intermediate days. And then also every now and then taking out an actual pure bunch sprint, because that's what he did in this tour.
Yep.
And that, to me, is a really impressive
a little bit
thing.
He had, of his 3 wins, 1 was uphill and 1 was a reduced field, right?
Yes.
So it wasn't, I'll give you maybe 1.
Yeah, one. I think 1 finish and then several intermediates. There were intermediates where Philipsen, he outgunned Philipsen even.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that guy's fast.
I think a lot of the real big group guys don't like. I think they really have that one, because a sprint at the end of the race, right, isn't a sprint. It's a series of like micro accelerations, and then if you're lucky, you get a window and you get to go as hard as you can go after all those micro accelerations into the finish. And I think a lot of people who are successful in that environment are not as good at the packs riding along. Okay, 2K, there's a sprint.
Right.
Like one teammate comes up and makes things fast for a couple of seconds, and then they do an acceleration. So I think that's something that maybe could be highlighted more, is the difference between an intermediate sprint versus a final sprint.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe one other talking point a little bit further down the GC, outside of the jersey battles. I thought that UAE, obviously UAE had an awesome tour. They had the strongest team by far at this tour. I think even like with 0 teammates, Tadej Pogacar still has a chance of winning the tour. But I want to point out for the upcoming Grand Tour of the year just how strong UAE was. Joao Almeida, 4th overall. Adam Yates, 6th overall. Both of them had great races, particularly Almeida. I thought Almeida was a spectacular teammate in addition to finishing 4th. And both he and Landa both did a really good job of doing excellent teamwork and then managing to still finish high enough to be in the top 5 overall. Both of them are going, Almeida and Yates, and also Mika Landa, by the way, I'm hoping, are all going to the Vuelta, and could make for an interesting race. And then a little bit farther down, Derek G with the top 10 overall. And just behind Matteo Jorgensen. So 2 North Americans in the top 10 overall. I'm happy about that, obviously. But Derek G, last year, I got to say, Kit Nicholson at one point pointed out, man, he's got this skill set, a climber, time trial. He seems like he could be a GC guy one day. And I remember thinking, that seems like a tall order. And he just finished 9th at the Tour de France. And Israel all along had their Tour de France GC guy under their nose, and he wasn't named Chris Froome. His name's Derek G.
It is interesting, the comparison. I don't know if it was Kit or Abby made with Geraint Thomas, who was another former trackie who had this sort of like showing this ability to go hard day after day after day, and like just wasn't physically built and training for GC. And I see Derek G could be another conversion along those lines. I also want to point out Derek G is still very starry-eyed about this. He's just like, yeah, I was riding in the GC group today, and we were going up a hill, and there were crowds just like on TV.
It's very wholesome.
It's just I appreciate the wholesomeness, but I can't help but wonder, if there is a certain experience that he will gain from doing this kind of with the, oh, wow, it's just like on TV, and kind of, over the successive years, transferring that experience to like, this is, there's a crowded section coming up. If I attack here, it's going to be hard for people to respond. Like that kind of incorporating that knowledge of actually doing these things into how he races the bike.
Yeah. Yeah. Were there any unheraldeds for you?
Not fully unheralded. I think Jorgensen, despite being very high profile and good and helpful, maybe does not get the full appreciation for his performance. If we think back to the gravel stage, he was the one kind of bailing Vingegaard out when Pogačar was making attacks. He was very reliably where he needed to be. He was able to follow Pogačar. He was able to drop back and bring Vingegaard up. And you contrast that with the last week where he is like the key mountain climbing domestique for Visma. Like that's a huge range of skills, and a range he was not training to have to fill the entire year. And to see him be able to do it so well, and not just performance wise, but like emotionally, like team esprit de corps wise, like he is the guy who's right there with Vingegaard after the stage, telling him what a great job he did, like kind of picking him up when he's feeling down, making jokes with him. It's very like, all these things are super important. It's a lot of stuff. It's not just riding hard at the front until your team leader can attack, right? And so, and then being the guy when Vingegaard didn't have the legs to like try and win the stage. Like he didn't start that day thinking he was going to win the stage, right? He doesn't think to start that day. He didn't ride the first 100 kilometers of that stage thinking, okay, I'm going to try and win the stage today. That was a thing that happened, and he had to figure it out and just go from there.
We assume he was in the break to potentially help out Vingegaard on that day with Vingegaard. The team is hoping in a position to jump ahead, link up with his breakaway teammates. That's not what happened.
After riding for several hours like that, okay, now you have to try and win the stage.
And he almost did it.
Yeah, only lost to Pogačar at his best by 20 seconds, which was enough of a threat. Like Pogačar considered him enough of a threat based on how he was riding that he was checking back over his shoulder to make sure he wasn't getting reeled back in. Like that's pretty huge. Like I think that is, I can't say I've seen a lot of performances like that before.
And just as a reminder, he won Dwars this year. That guy who did that on a climb up to 2,000 meters at a ski station won Dwars of Vlaanderen this year, where like Stefan Kung was also in the top 5. Like that the range you say, it's really impressive. Yep. And obviously we liked Matteo Jorgensen. We've talked about him quite a fair bit on this podcast, but I think it's deserved. Well, I feel like we kind of wrapped the tour, all the talking points. If you disagree and you're listening, feel free to hit us up on Discord. Well, first of all, go sign up to become a member at escapecollective.com.
Then get on the Discord. And then you have to @me because Discord is too overwhelming. I need to be added. I can't go through every single chat and see every single thing.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. At us if you have opinions. That's kind of it for the men's tour. The Olympics are looming. TT's next weekend? Road race after that. I guess there are other disciplines besides the road.
Maybe. I don't know.
People ride mountain bikes as well. They ride
Tom
on a
Pidcock.
track. All those things coming up. We got that coming up. We've also got Women's Tour. And, the Vuelta a España not that far away. So get hyped for all that good stuff. We will have plenty of coverage of all those things, obviously, here on this podcast. But over at escapecollective.com, go check it out. And, we'll talk. Geek Warning, placeholders. They all have their own feeds. Go check those out as well. We'll be back next week. Hope you enjoyed the 2024 Tour de France. I certainly did. Cosmo, did you enjoy the 2024 Tour de France?
I did.
Good.
I did.
Okay.
I don't always enjoy the Tour de France. I still, there are things that I find very frustrating about it in general, but no, this was a worthwhile watch.
A worthwhile watch, and we didn't talk about this too much, but I mean, truly historic achievement to win the Giro Tour double. Tadej Pogacar taking 6 stages, just next level, incredible. I mean, we are watching a rider that I think 20 years from now people will talk about how they got to watch Tadej Pogacar, and we got to see that this year. And yeah, that's history made in a bunch of different ways this tour. Benyam Girmay, Tadej Pogacar, Carapaz, first Ecuadorian. Mark Cavendish broke a record, set a new record. Sorry, yeah,
Yeah, he finished. He finished.
he
the
did
tour.
finish. Yeah, which is hard because the Alps are hard.
Yeah, he's an old man.
All right, that's our coverage of the 2024 Tour de France. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back in a week. I'm Dane Cash. Who are you? What was this?
I'm Cosmo Catalano. And that was the How the Race Was Won podcast.